Welcome to another episode of This Is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast. Season 2, Episode 17. Your safe space to discuss sports, politics, social issues, and even religion. Well, we will take it all very seriously, but not too seriously. This week, a reflection on meditation, how over why, modern medicine and prescription drugs. And the petty part of me comes out. I retract my mea culpa. Deshaun Watson will never play another down in the National Football League. Many thanks, much gratitude to all my listeners. Please, if you haven't already, give the podcast a like, thumbs up, rating, review, distribute it far and wide to the peoples. This Is Why I Don't Vote podcast is on Patreon. Please visit and support if you like what you hear. Enough of that, let's go.
Act 1, on meditation.
I've been meaning to do this segment for a very long time. It's part and parcel in conjunction with the spiritual journey I'm on, the change I've made in my life, specific to going to Costa Rica and sitting with ayahuasca, though more broadly something that can be done every day, and in fact, I do it every day. It's meditation. I actually started meditating a year before I went to Costa Rica. I started meditating in the heart, in the heat of COVID. I, just like you, dear listener, for the first month or 6 weeks of COVID, was eating anything that I wanted, was watching all the shows on Netflix that I hadn't yet watched, was basically sitting around my house wondering what the hell was going to happen on planet Earth. Like you, generally unhappy, generally frustrated. There are a lot of tools for people to employ no matter what their situation in life. And we all found ourselves, no matter where you're from, no matter how old you are, geographic region, all the things that I mention on the podcast routinely, this is one thing that we all had in common, that the world got locked down. And so many people are still having issues from that lockdown as if there weren't any tools. There was nothing that they can do. They were trapped. That's just not true. There's always something that you can do. There's always some kind of action you can take if you're willing to take action. If you're willing to take action, if you're motivated, you'll find that thing. I was open to solving the problem, and the solution came to me. Now, I don't mention this to argue that I'm somehow superior or that I've got things figured out where other people don't. It's simply to reinforce the idea that if you're open to a solution to any problem that you have, that solution will present to you. That more often than not, as people, no matter how much we proclaim that we're unhappy, or that we're dissatisfied, or that we're frustrated, we aren't going to open ourselves to any solution. We want the solution to present as we want it. And if it does not present that way, then we will disallow it. We will ignore it. We will reject it. We will lambaste it. We have an attachment to outcome. We have an attachment or expectation of result. And if we don't get that, then we haven't gotten the solution. Mind you, I didn't have this awareness in the moment in July or in June of 2020 when we're in the heat, the throes of COVID. I just knew that I couldn't keep going in the direction that I was going. It didn't appear that we were going to be able to get out of the house. I needed to make some changes. One of those changes was that I began working out every day in my home. The other change was that I began to meditate. And I was very fortunate that I had someone refer me to an app. It's called Waking Up. You go into your app store, you type into the browser, Waking Up. And that's exactly what it is. Meditation is waking up. Now, I never wanted to try meditation. Everything that I associated with meditation were things that were probably rejected parts of myself. In that Jungian sense, these are parts of yourself because we're all one consciousness. We're all one. You see things that are part of that oneness and you reject them. I was rejecting this swaying around the campfire, kumbaya style, humming, chanting, sitting in solitude, pondering on the nothingness. Not to say that there aren't some adherents out there that might practice meditation in that manner. This was completely different. Waking Up presented meditation in a very practical way, consistent with Buddhism, and I've explored a lot more about Buddhism. That's not what this segment is about. I might go into that in another segment. But the Buddhist practice of meditation and Buddhism in general is very practical. Yes, we're all old enough, and again, I know practically everyone that listens to this podcast, that when we went to the airport and we saw the quote-unquote Buddhists in the robes with their little chimes and cymbals and gongs, we thought, those are the fucking crazy people. And I'm not going to sit here today and judge them, but I'm not going to say that they aren't crazy, because there are, just like in every religion, many different interpretations, many sects, and the people who would stand at the airport are probably the extreme sect in Buddhism. One of the tenets of Buddhism is its practicality. You do things, you see how they affect your life. If there is pleasure, if there is success, if you see things change for the better, then you continue to do them. If you don't see these things, or if things get worse, if you don't have any practical benefit from doing it, stop doing it. Looking at meditation through that lens, I was willing to give it a try. I'll try this. If I don't get any benefit from it, what does it hurt? I'm stuck in this house anyway. I don't have anyone that I need to please or prove anything to. I can't communicate with the outside world, so I might as well try this meditation. I've told people that I've been meditating, and they ask me the same thing. What do you do? And it's very simple. It's not that you don't do anything. In fact, people who practice meditation and use some kind of mystic Zen type language to describe what they're doing, I think it's disingenuous, and that may be judgmental. I don't think that it actually communicates well enough what meditation is and what it can do for you, and therefore it's limited the appeal of meditation to a number of different types of people. There is no real mystique. Via the Waking Up app, you can go through guided meditations, and it's very practical what you're trying to do. You are trying to notice what you notice when you notice it, and then notice your attachment to the things that you notice. When you were sitting quietly meditating, if you've got your eyes closed, you may see things in your visual field. You aren't focusing to create something in your visual field, and yet it appears. You are noticing what's appearing in your visual field. You are sitting quietly and meditating, and you may hear sounds. You can focus and hear those sounds, but you can't focus and create those sounds. You are noticing those sounds appear in consciousness. You are sitting quietly and meditating. You have sensations in the body. You can feel that energy. You are focusing on that energy, yet you're sitting quietly and you aren't creating those sensations. You are realizing, you're noticing these sensations occurring on their own in this space of consciousness. And then there are the big two, feelings and thoughts. You are sitting there quietly meditating. You may be focusing on your breath. You may be focusing on your visual field with your eyes closed. You may be simply focusing, noticing the sounds that you hear. And then a feeling comes up. And you notice you are feeling a certain way. You may be happy. You may be sad. You may be exuberant. You may be depressed. You are sitting there quietly, focusing on something, and then you have a feeling come over you. You are not focusing on creating that feeling. You notice that feeling appear in this space of consciousness. You are sitting there, focusing on your breath. You are noticing a sound, and then a thought appears in your head. Then you are a part of that thought. You get lost in that thought. And before you realize it, seconds, maybe minutes have transpired, and you are lost in that thought. You were focusing on something completely different. that thought appeared to you. You didn't create that thought. It appeared to you, and then you got lost in it. You can notice these things occur. Now, I'm not going to go into any of the foundation, the tenets, any underlying physical, metaphysical, scientific, spiritual explanation for the self and the superconscious and the conscious and your alter ego. Not to say that that hasn't been important to me, but that's not the point of this segment. This segment is to actually point out what I believe has been left out of the conversation about meditation and why it's been held back in many of our minds because of its popularization with mystic, with Zen-like qualities. The revelation for me was simple. You are not any of the things that you experience. If you can take a step back and notice any of the things that you are experiencing in consciousness, you can make a conscious decision on what to focus on, and then you can make a conscious decision on how to act based on what you are experiencing. This analogy is used somewhat on the app in a number of different lectures during guided meditations, but it's waves on the water. The things that you experience in consciousness are like waves on the surface of water. The water exists absent any wave. The wave needs water to exist. The waves are the thoughts, the emotions, the sights, the sounds, the experience that you have in this open space of consciousness. They come through you like waves, but you are not attached to any of those waves. You are the water. You are consciousness. You are experiencing consciousness regardless of whether or not you attach to any of the things that come flowing through you. You can step back, you can notice them, you can even focus on them, and then you can make a conscious choice about how you act or react to them. This has been the goal, the benefit of my meditation practice. Let's talk about the big two. Let's talk about thoughts. Let's talk about feelings. Starting with thoughts, everyone can relate to what I'm about to say. We've all done it. You are going to work in the morning and you followed your morning routine to a T. It is ritual. You get into the car, you're on your way to work. You have finished work. You are getting into your car and you're driving home. You drive to work the same way, you drive home the same way. It is ritual. You get out of your car to go into work, or you get out of your car to go into your home, and you realize, I don't remember the drive at all. I wasn't paying attention. I have fleeting recollection about individual incidents over the course of a 20, 30, 40-minute commute. I don't remember the starting. I don't remember the stopping. I don't remember the right turns. I don't remember the left turns. I don't remember the acceleration. I don't remember the deceleration. Maybe fleeting glimpses. You drove all the way to work. You drove all the way home. You don't remember. This is the best example of being lost in a thought. We are routinely lost in our own thoughts. And we don't think that we are lost in a thought while we're lost in that thought. And I'm going to repeat that. We don't think that we're lost in a thought while we are lost in the thought. We are so attached to what we are thinking that we think it's a part of us, that we are the source of it, that we are creating it. I hope that wheel is now spinning around in your head, dear listener. That thought that you were thinking flowed through you and you attach to it like a wave. Here is a Patrick Knackley original. I developed this as I was meditating. It came through me. These waves of thoughts, of feelings, emotions, sights, sounds, experiences, these things flow through you. And if you aren't aware that they are flowing through you, you often ride them like a surfer on a wave unintentionally. You inadvertently believe yourself to have no control. that this emotion is flowing through me, therefore I am the emotion. This thought is flowing through me, therefore I am the thought. I am bound to the experiences that I am experiencing right now. You were at work and you were completely frustrated with a coworker. You're in traffic and you were completely frustrated by another motorist. You're in any of life's circumstances and you feel like the people around you are thwarting what you want, your desires, your goals. These emotions flow through you in the moment and you feel completely and totally attached to the emotion as if you were the source of it, as if you had no choice. This is just where you are in the moment. We've all felt like this. We have all thought thoughts that we don't understand why we're thinking them and we think we don't have any control over it. We've all felt emotions, we've all had feelings, and we don't understand why we're so in that moment attached to them and we feel like we have no control over it. This is why meditation is so valuable, because it demonstrates to you none of that is the truth. That is a dream. You were literally living in a dream of your own making because you're ignorant as to the way your consciousness operates. Meditation is you waking up out of your conscious dream. You go to sleep at night and you wake up out of an unconscious dream. Meditation is the tool for you to wake up in this waking conscious dream. I don't have years of experience meditating. I don't have this wealth of knowledge from the limited time I've been doing this. What I can tell you is that even in the limited amount of time that I've been doing this, I've had these emotions just come through me, whether or not it's anger or fear, whether or not it's excitement, lust, joy. It may take a second, but you realize that this is an emotion that's coming through you. You see it for what it is. You notice it, and you notice that you don't have an attachment to it. It's flowing through you from what you feel like is some external outside source. Why is this coming up? What is going on? And then you realize it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter why it's coming up. I can either choose to give it energy by focusing on it, by attaching myself to it, by riding that wave, or I can just let it go. Quick side note, you can also allow these emotions to come up and explore them in the open space of consciousness while you are meditating. It's not that you simply ignore all of the things that you feel. It's simply that you notice them and you can ignore them. You make the choice. And even more than that, thoughts. It is so common while you are meditating to be focused on your breath or focused on sounds or focused on your visual field with your eyes closed or even with your eyes open. And 30, 60, 120 seconds later, you may realize that you've been lost in a thought. You have the wherewithal that you were sitting in a calm, quiet space, meditating on something specifically, and a thought comes through and you immediately get attached to it and start riding it like a wave. This is the most profound part of meditation. These thoughts that we so attach ourselves to, that we so believe that we are the source of, when you were sitting there quietly and you are not trying to do anything but focus on sights or sounds or on your breath, and you see these thoughts come through you, or you notice after you've started to attach to a thought that you've done so, do you realize, my God, these things just come flowing through all day long, and you were routinely attaching yourself to them, and they have no source within you. And what I mean to say by no source within you, you are not focusing on something in order to create this thought. You may hear a song pop into your head. You may remember an event that happened to you years before. You may begin to plan out something that's going to happen in your day and actually begin to experience an interaction with someone else or experience something that you're going to do in a thought that's so real, it's almost like you're telling the future. We all do this. The the fact of the matter is, it's not us. We're not attached to any of it. We can choose to attach to it, and most of us are choosing, by way of ignorance, to attach to every one of the thoughts that we notice. But that's a choice. It's a choice. Once you actually step back and see these waves flowing through you, you can make that choice. We are all surfers, and we all have waves that are coming through us at all times. And we can choose which waves to give energy to, which waves to give our focus to, which waves that we want to act on, or we can ignorantly allow the water to whip us around and to take us wherever it's going to take us. One of the analogies that I did hear on the app, and I really appreciated, was you get into a boat, you're the boat's captain, you push off from the dock, you leave shore, you set sail, and do what? You just stand at the helm and do nothing? Let the boat drift, take you where it will? That's what most of us are doing, dear listener. That's what most of us are doing. Meditation is the tool by which you can put your hands on the wheel and begin to steer.
Act 2. How over why, modern medicine, and prescription drugs.
I made reference a couple weeks ago to a piece that I've been thinking about, that I've been crafting with regard to modern medicine, modern drugs, and the way that science evaluates primary purpose to do no harm. For the 4 or 5 of you that may not have listened to last week's episode, but are in fact listening to this week's episode, which would make an aggregate of roughly 10 listeners, I spoke to the gentleman who had shot up the supermarket in Buffalo, and also the 2 kids who had shot up the school in Columbine decades ago. As it turned out, and the public only found out about this years after the incident, the 2 kids who shot up Columbine were doped up full of antidepressants, all sorts of adult drugs, and even by their parents' admission, these drugs had an effect on the psychological, the emotional, the social elements of their children's lives. When you hear of these abhorrent, these horrific acts being committed, you rarely ever hear whether or not the person is actually taking a sleep aid, an anti-anxiety drug, an antidepressant drug, a mood stabilizer. The long-term effects of these drugs is unknown. They're just unknown. No matter what the drug companies have told us, they do not understand, nor do they want to understand the long-term effects, particularly the addictive effects, particularly the psychological effects a lot of these drugs have on their patients. These effects can be as mild as allergies or headaches to as severe as psychosis. There are more than just anecdotal stories now of people who are claiming that on these drugs, anti-anxiety medicine, antidepressants, they go into psychotic episodes, particularly when they're trying to wean off of those drugs. What I want to address in this piece, and what I want to address about modern medicine, particularly modern drugs, is what they are designed to do and what the body is trying to do, and how those two things are in opposite, and how modern medicine has no answer for the whys, they only have an answer for the hows. Let's start by talking about what these drugs do. For all intents and purposes, all these drugs do is turn off certain chemicals in your brain, or they turn off certain chemical receptors in your brain. Your brain is producing something, or the chemical receptors are receiving something, and these medications turn that off. The first question I've asked myself, I've been asking myself this for years, I've been waiting for an answer for years, and I believe that I am among many, that many of you out there are asking the same exact question. Why? Why are people's brains doing that? Why are their brains giving signals to their bodies, creating chemicals in their bodies that are so antithetical to their own health? Science, modern medicine, has no answers. The reason why I haven't done a piece like this in the past is here's where I go on a rant, and I'm very much trying to avoid doing that, because everyone has their own individual story, but people have to take individual responsibility for what's going on in their lives. I've always found it almost laughable. I take that back. It is laughable. I find it laughable when you hear these reports, these data sets being put together that in a city or a state or a region or even nationwide, X amount of people now identify as anxious, or Y amount of people identify as depressed. If the number is, let's just say, 33%, 1 in 3 people identify as depressed or anxious, I think to myself, what about the other 2? What is it about that one person that identifies that way? What is it about their life that's so much different from the other 2 people? There is this notion that somehow the person who's experiencing these things has obviously gone through things in their lives that are so much different and so much more traumatic than the other people who don't identify that way. Well, of course they're going to identify as anxious, or of course they're going to identify as depressed. Our bodies are built perfectly. We are a model of perfect health. When our bodies begin to produce chemicals that work in opposite to our overall health, that's our body telling us something. You're thinking something wrong. You're doing something wrong. It's just a gauge. It's just the light that comes on in your car when you're running low on gas. It's just the smoke alarm that goes off in your house when there's a fire. The answer to these alarms or these gauges going off, according to modern medicine, according to modern drugs, the answer is simple. Just turn off the alarm. Just turn off the gauge. You turn off the alarm, you turn off the gauge, you can continue to think the same types of thoughts. You can continue to engage in the same types of actions, and you can certainly entertain, and if not entertain, wallow in the same types of emotions. The only change that you need to make in your life is introducing this new pill, this new regimen of taking these pills. What do you hear from the people who are on these regimen of pills? They are basically drones. A lot of the things that are turned off by these drugs are sensory receptors that would help people feel like people. You are toning down their sensory reception. Modern medicine, particularly advocates for these types of drugs, well, you don't understand. And that's always what it starts with. You don't understand. There's an element of people. There's a segment. There's a population. I have no doubt that this is true. I have no doubt that there is a segment of the population of people who are taking antidepressants that would be depressed no matter how much exercise they had, no matter their diet, no matter if they changed geographic regions, if they changed occupations, if they were in a different family dynamic. But the numbers themselves are staggering, and they don't tell lies. The number of people who are now taking these drugs is indicative of the fact that fewer and fewer people are seeing these signals from their body, these signals from their brain, as an indicator that something is wrong, and instead trying to turn off the gauges, turn off the alarms by taking a pill. At its heart, it's fundamentally lazy. It's a refusal to do the work necessary to identify what in your life is causing the problem and then to make the change in your life. People who are now addicted to these drugs, these antidepressants, these anti-anxiety medications, these mood enhancers, they want sympathy for having to deal with the untold, unknown side effects. If I am driving along in my car and that gas gauge goes off, signifying that I'm low on gas, and I simply cover it up so that I don't have to see it, am I a victim because I'm going to suffer from the consequence of running out of the gas and the car no longer being able to operate? We have to ask ourselves, Why is this happening? Why is my body doing what it's doing? Why is my brain doing what it's doing? And what can I do to make changes in my life to course correct? That's what this ingenious machine is doing. It's demanding that I course correct. That's why the human body and the human brain are much more powerful than any computer, and likely will be more powerful than any computer ever created, any program ever created. We have a navigational system. We have a guidance system within us. It is not just our brain. It is our brain and all of our organs working in conjunction with one another, and they course correct when something is wrong. When your computer has a problem, when the software has a problem, it breaks down. It either gives you an error message or it breaks down. The problem is, with a computer, with a software program, you need a third party to figure out what the issue is. In the case of the human body, you, as the individual, are the one who is supposed to identify the problem, who's being told to identify the problem. Instead, we go to the third party, like we are some computer program in need of a software update, that we can't do it ourselves, that we have some sort of malfunction. We are now embracing this theory that has been proffered by science, that many of us operate on a malfunction, that we have malfunctioning parts, or we have malfunctioning chemicals, stimuli in our brain. It's not true. We create the malfunction, and then as we react to it, we remove ourselves, we blame others, we blame conditions, we blame other people, we blame situations. We have the answer. As many of the longtime listeners of this program know, I am a markets guy. I believe in markets, and seeing the rise in holistic medicine, the amount of money and energy that's going into holistic medicine in the 21st century, it's no surprise to me, because modern medicine, particularly through modern drugs, has no answers. It's nothing to do with why. Why is this happening? It's all about the how. Well, you've got this chemical that's being produced in your brain. You've got something going on in one of your organs. How do they know these things? They measure it. They measure it with machines. They can't measure with any machine why the brain is doing this, why the stomach is doing that. But they can measure a condition that's occurring. That's the paradox about relying on a measurement. A measurement alone is not the best indicator of what's going on. It certainly doesn't address the why. Measurements, as a scientific tool, are often limited to the instruments that measure. Therefore, the universe, the scope of the truth, is often the universe, the scope of the tool that measures. A great example of this measurement fallacy is the atom, and then the proton, and the neutron, and the electron. The kids had a microscope. It couldn't see atoms. Therefore, whatever there was bigger than an atom, cells, molecules, this was the stuff of the universe. This was the makeup of the universe. Then the kids got a little bit more powerful a microscope. And then what happened? There's an atom. We can actually see an atom. What's the makeup of the universe? Now it's an atom. And why is it now the atom? It's because we got ourselves a better measuring tool. Then the kids got themselves a bit better microscope. This atom thing, it's actually not the smallest particle in the universe. There are actually particles that make up an atom. You've got this neutron thing. You've got this proton thing. You've got this electron thing. Well, they're the new fabric of the universe. That's the smallest thing we can measure with our measuring tool. That's got to be the fabric of the universe. This is going to shock you, dear listener, but the kids got themselves a better microscope. And it wasn't a little bit better, it was a lot better. And what the kids found was that even in the universe of a proton or an electron, you had particles floating around one another in space on close observation. These particles floating around weren't just floating around. They were actually orbiting one another. They operated in an orbit like the planets do in our solar system. They appeared to be affected by not only gravity, but by one another. Because these particles were not part of the same makeup, it pretty much threw out all of the theories, all of the proofs, all of the truths that we had, that we knew about the makeup of our universe. I see no difference with a lot of the instruments now that are being used to identify ailments within the physical human body. These are very technical, highly savvy, sophisticated machines, and all they can do is measure. Why? Why is one's body doing this? Why is one person on a New York City street claiming to be depressed and 4 other people can say, I'm not depressed? What's the difference between their lives? What's the difference in their experience? The scientist looks for what the scientist can measure, has to go back into the past, the history of each one of the people, and wants to get into a detailed discussion of how things affected them. What are they thinking? What are they doing? What are they being called on to do in their lives that they're not doing? I look at all the people who have been treated, who are being treated for ADD and ADHD, and I had a very, very passionate, if not tantrum-throwing piece about ADD and ADHD last season when it came to Simone Biles. For the life of me, I'm going to refrain from getting back into that vibration, that frequency. ADHD, ADD, these drugs are school drugs. You need to be docile and obedient in school. So you have been now qualified as ADHD or ADD because you aren't docile enough in school. We need to turn you off. We need to take you down a notch. The chemicals in your brain, we need to readjust their flow, their production, their reception, so that you will be a better student. Better, of course, equating to docile and obedient. I know many people who likely would have been diagnosed with ADD or ADHD, particularly in today's age, particularly with today's doctors, particularly with today's school administrators. They're some of the most creative, active people that I know. They aren't built like everyone else. Their brains don't operate the way everyone else's brain operates. You have a infrastructure of school administrators all the way from kindergarten through college speaking about how each student is an individual, and yet when it comes to what goes on in those classrooms, they want docile, they want obedient, they want uniformity. And ADHD medication, ADD medication, this is the easiest way to achieve as much. That someone may not be well suited to sitting in a classroom 8 hours a day in order to quote-unquote learn, in order to quote-unquote be educated, that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them. If you live in a major urban area and you work at a job that keeps you up 16 hours a day, no matter how much money you're making, you need to examine your life and determine whether or not that's the reason why you're anxious. That's the reason why you're depressed. I will admit, frankly and honestly, one of the reasons why that I started this podcast, the law as an outlet for creativity is a piss-poor outlet. It is often a dull, a dreary, a mind-numbing occupation. Many fine, talented, experienced lawyers are infinitely unhappy because they don't have any other outlet to express themselves, and they don't really have the courage to leave the law, if not at least do something outside of the law, to speak to some of the passions that they aren't expressing within that profession. Whenever I speak to mental health, to anxiety, to depression, people throw that back in my face. You don't understand. You don't understand. I've been practicing law for 22 years. I know about anxiety. I know about depression. Hell, it's practically a prerequisite to make it past 10 years in the law. I made significant changes in my career. I made significant changes in my geographic location in response to some of the things that I was feeling, some of the things that my mind was doing, that my body was doing, refusing to simply solve all my problems by taking a pill. Does that mean that I'm the model of health? No. As one gets older, you start to experience all sorts of different issues, and it's your body communicating with you. Hey, you know that diet that you really, really enjoy? I don't enjoy it anymore. And you know what I'll do? I'm going to make your life miserable if you continue to shove that spicy food down your gullet, if you continue to drink the way that you've been drinking. The first call to action, dear listener, is to ask why. And then the harder part, likely the hardest part of our lives, is to actually listen with the intent of being open to the response. When we listen with the intent of being open to the response, most of us are going to hear something that we don't want to hear. We will be asked to face something we may not want to face. Are you going to have the courage, dear listener, to ask why, and then to be that open vessel to listen to the response and to accept it? Or are you going to seek out another pill?
Act 3. 24 consensual happy endings.
I came on to the show and took my comeuppance. I admitted that once again I was wrong. Deshaun Watson is going to play football again, having been traded to the Cleveland Browns. The Browns seemed completely committed to him. All that was left was the nature of his suspension from the National Football League. The National Football League has a player conduct policy. It was within the discretion of the commissioner's office how many games he was going to be suspended. Word around the campfire at the commissioner's office is that he will be suspended. Deshaun Watson will be suspended for a year, although he may be able to reduce that to 6 games if he were to appeal and perhaps all of the lawsuits had been settled, he wasn't charged criminally, perhaps he could get it down to 6 games through an appeal. After the Real Sports episode last week about Deshaun Watson, another accuser has come forward to file a lawsuit, and there appears to be now a 24th accuser that is ready to join the litigation and to file her own lawsuit. Again, 24 total litigants, 23 right now known, 1 potential. In the wake of all of this, Deshaun Watson's attorney, Rusty Hardin, went on to a sports talk show in Houston, Texas. I'm recording this on June the 3rd. That interview was today. It took place today. In that interview, Hardin went on to say about all of these women who are coming forward that a happy ending isn't against the law unless there is money paid specifically for that happy ending. Money paid in excess of the massage services. The implication being that in each and every one of these circumstances, according to Rusty Hardin, who represents Deshaun Watson went in to get a massage. And if sex eventually occurred throughout the course of the massage, that would just be sex occurring between 2 consenting adults. I took that comment to further mean that in the event that the 2 consenting adults did not have sex, well, let bygones be bygones. Deshaun Watson went out, had a massage, flirted a little bit, saw if there was an opportunity there, and if the opportunity didn't present, he just professionally and respectfully got up and left the room. Nothing more to it than that. On its face, this entire proposition is preposterous. It is preposterous that Deshaun Watson went out, sought out all of these different women for massages, and simply was flirting with them throughout the course of the massage, had no intention of ever paying them for any kind of sexual contact. And if sex just happened to occur, well, he was open to it, and clearly she was open to it. It was just 2 consenting adults having fun. If that's the defense If that's what Deshaun Watson is going to do when he goes into these depositions, set forth a line of bullshit like that. If that's what Deshaun Watson's going to do when he walks into these 24 different trials, is set forth a line of bullshit like that, the man is going to lose some of these cases, if not all of them. Harden going on to that radio talk show and saying something as preposterously stupid as he did has to be one of the biggest public relations blunders in the last 50 years of all humanity. And it also beggars belief that there was no illegality in the fact that these two didn't exchange money for sex so that nothing illegal happened. What Harden is doing there, quite cleverly, is saying, well, this went before a grand jury, and the grand jury, in fact, I think it went before 2 grand juries. These grand juries, well, there was no indictment. No indictment means no illegality. People are dumb, but they're not that dumb. And you may think that my point in proffering all of this on a podcast segment is to point my finger at Harden, point my finger at Deshaun Watson, and say, bad. No, dear listener, it's even more petty than that. I'm retracting my apology and my mea culpa over whether or not Deshaun Watson's ever going to play football again. I want to be clear about this. The NFL was ready to allow Ray Rice to come back and play football. Ray Rice never misrepresented himself, never misrepresented what he did hitting his fiancée in that elevator. He never lied to anyone about that incident. The NFL was ready to let him come back and play. And the public backlash that stemmed from that incident once the video came out made it impossible for Ray Rice to be able to play football again. The spectacle of Ray Rice going from city to city, game to game, press conference to press conference, and having to deal with the aftermath of him punching his fiancée and knocking her out, the NFL didn't want to deal with it. No team wanted to deal with it. They had to get rid of that spectacle. That is now what Deshaun Watson has turned into. And Rusty Harden put the nail into that coffin. If their defense of 24 different women coming forward and saying that there was sexual harassment involving Deshaun Watson and these massages, that there was unwanted sexual contact, and their defense is, well, we didn't pay for sex, so nothing illegal happened. This was simply 2 consenting adults, and if there wasn't consent, Deshaun Watson would just get up and respectfully leave the premises. That's absurd. It's asinine. These cases will haunt Deshaun Watson long after whatever suspension the NFL levies against him, and the NFL will then have Ray Rice 2.0. They'll have a player that is a marquee player, that is in the limelight in every game that he plays in, having to answer for this week after week, month after month, and, given the way civil trials progress, perhaps season after season. And this is after Deshaun Watson could potentially be suspended for a year. Apology retracted. Mea culpa retracted. I'm going back and I'm doubling down. Deshaun Watson isn't going to play another down in the National Football League. This is Why I Don't Vote, a podcast.